Hello, and welcome to the Five Things Podcast, a podcast where we talk about five things. It has been the hottest of minutes since we have done an episode. You're not going to know that because they're all going to come out a week apart anyway, but we have been on a brief hiatus, triumphant return, and we're getting meta, getting real meta. We're just going to talk about podcasts on our podcast. That's what the people want. If you're listening to this, that means you like podcasts. That means we're talking about a thing that you like already. Although advertising other arguably better things to listen to from a business perspective is probably a poor decision. But I've already made the graphics, so we're doing it.
Yeah, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, so this was an easy one for me, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, it turns out I don't. I have exactly 5 podcasts, and I just had to figure out the order to put them in.
All right.
We
need to decide who goes first. What about the longest running podcast?
I was going to ask how many role-playing game podcasts you have, although I assume the answer is 5.
Okay, first off, the answer is 1.5. Technically. I limited myself. Technically, I don't know. That's a complex answer for me, I guess, is the best way to put it.
So if we're gonna do longest running, I might win. Only
I have one from 2010 is I think my earliest.
I need to
2010 is definitely my earliest podcast on my list.
Hold on, I need to open up a whole other browser.
I need to stop doing that too. We need to get you some sort of iPad thing that you can have to look stuff up on when we do this, so you don't have to worry about everything showing up on your screen. We'll get there.
Yeah, I'm trying
This is all going to get cut out anyway, so it's fine.
No, we're leaving all this in.
Cool. All right, fun.
I'm trying to figure out when episode 1 of this thing. I've got one of the OG podcasts on my list.
Oh yeah. Normal. I just searched mine by name and it comes up on the right side on Google, and it'll say number of episodes and it'll say original release. And I assume if it's an OG podcast, it probably has a Wikipedia page, which is what's popping up here.
2006.
Damn, yeah, you got me by a while.
Yeah. A winner is me.
Podcast in 2006,
dude. It's one of the I almost had
you had to listen to that on the iPad, or sorry, the iPod original in 2011.
Yeah, no, this is literally this is for the young folk out there. Back in the day, podcasts weren't streamed. You had to literally download them and then listen to them like a cave person.
You might have listened to this on the iPod Nano 2nd generation or the 6th generation iPod Classic.
Yeah.
In 2006.
And then deleted it immediately after because having an hour-long audio file was enough to fill your entire iPod Nano. Right?
Peace.
But yeah, it is not my number one fun bonus podcast that isn't on mine. I almost had the Jimmy Pardo podcast on here, Never Not Funny. Okay. And that's literally one of the first podcasts. It is 2000. I don't even want to guess because it's how old it is. But it was almost my number 5, and I didn't because I haven't listened to it forever. But anyway, let's do this thing.
Hell yeah.
Number 5. So my number 5 actually just ended this week, and it probably should have been my number 1 because of that, but it isn't. Deal with it. And that is New Player Has Joined. This podcast is an absolute trip. Austin, I know that I've talked to you about this podcast before. This is actually also pretty old. This came out, its first episode came out right when I got out of school. So 2018, 2019. Mm-hmm. And it starts for years. Just these two dudes, they're comedians, they're writers. They did Second City and they moved to New York and and they had just other funny people that they could get. And they would just talk about whatever that funny person's favorite video game is. It didn't matter. A lot of the time they would have people on who would just be I don't like video games very much. And they'd be okay, well, if you had to pick a game. and then they'd be like, well, I guess like I would play like Fez. And then this person would like go nuts about Fez for hours. Like literally every episode is people being like, I don't really play that many video games except for this one game that I know literally everything about.
I know the deep lore.
Like crazy
Concept
stuff.
art.
Like one person did like a weird like Need for Speed mobile game. And I was like, this is going to be lame. And it was not lame because they knew everything about this thing. But like, this is how it goes for like a long time. And then COVID hits. And these dudes have like a full-blown like mental fucking break. They're roommates. They start doing daily episodes that are nothing to do with video games. Like there are hundreds now of episodes. They did one every single day for like a year straight of them just getting like really shitty about like politics and like how we need to like burn down the government and like all kinds of crazy stuff.
That is not on their list of episodes. If you go to Starburns Audio, which is evidently their host,
not
only has 175 episodes on there.
Yeah, so they were on Starburns for like a super long time, and then they switched podcast networks because they were on the podcast. I think maybe they switched to Starburns. I don't know. They've got like there was some weird beef with the guy who did At Midnight. Also a guy whose podcast would have made my list, but turns out he sucks.
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, we are missing a lot of episodes, even on Spotify. No, like they did daily episodes, and like it was just them like screaming into microphones about how pissed off they were at like the police. It was great. It was crazy to witness, and they like literally just ended it not that long ago. I think they just decided not to. I haven't listened to the most recent episodes. I found it on Twitter they were stopping, but it's awesome, and like it's a really good podcast. It like starts out really slow, but like even like the video game stuff on it, they like do games for every episode they do, and it's stuff like Limp Bizkit track or name of level from this video game. Like, and like the other guy just has to guess, and they're just
That's
like
hilarious.
they're like I don't know, like I can't do it.
You should listen to the last episode they did. It's episode 175, Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, well,
which sounds right up your alley.
They've been doing Final Fantasy VII like by disc. So I can't listen to the last one because I need to listen to I've heard disc 1 and disc 2. No, I've only heard disc 1. I have not heard disc 2 yet. So I need to find the other Final Fantasy VII one, and then I can listen to the final episode. But yeah, this was a huge podcast for me. I listened to it every day for a very long time, and then kind of fell off, and I need to get back into it. Although it sounds like I can't. I think all of their weird ranty episodes are gone, it looks like. But if you get your hands on it, man, do. It was crazy to witness and like as it happened.
I'm sad that I missed it. I kept meaning to listen to it because you told me about this at the time that it was happening. But it was COVID, and I was, doing whatever, whenever.
Right. We all were.
Yeah.
That's my number 5.
Screaming into the abyss. That's a good number 5, man. My number 5 is Welcome to Night Vale, which is the first podcast I ever listened to. I never had an Apple device. My first MP3 player was actually this, like, really crappy MP3 player that my aunt got me at Kohl's in like 2000 and I'm gonna say 2007 probably, and it could only hold 2.5 albums worth of songs on it. I remember having like going to the library and burning CDs to add to it. And I had like Pink Floyd's The Wall and then Ride the Lightning. And then I had like half of Green Day's American Idiot, and so I had to like switch the albums I wanted. So I was late to the game, but I finally ended up getting an iPhone like 3 or 4 when I was a senior in high school because I needed a new phone, and my dad wanted a new phone, and so I got his old one, the iPhone 4 in 2014, which was old at that point if I recall correctly, and I had it for like 3 years after that. It caught my backpack on fire. Is why I ended up getting rid of it. Funnily enough.
What?
That's not the point of this episode. Yeah,
no, fuck you. We're not skipping over that. You caught your backpack on fire with.
Yeah. So I had an iPhone 4, and I was a sophomore in college, and it was where I went to college was in northeastern Indiana, and it was famously like colder there in the winter than the surface of the moon for like a month at a time, because we had the lake effect from Lake Michigan, and we were in the northeastern like corner of Indiana, and it's just completely flat up there. So the wind like whips off of Lake Michigan and whips through campus. And these are like 150 miles apart, but just like the weather pattern there. So it's brutally cold all the time. It was so cold, and my campus was maybe a mile across, but it was so cold that walking across campus, if I didn't put the phone in my inside pocket, like against my chest, it would get so cold it would turn off. And so that phone dealt with that for like 2 years, and it got to the point where it was an iPhone 4, and those iPhone 4s and earlier were known for having a lot of battery problems. And I had to charge it like every couple of hours so it wouldn't die, because it was just such an old phone at that point. And I had charged it and put it in my backpack before leaving for class, and I was sitting in the cafeteria with it in, like, I had a backpack that had like a little pouch at the top where you put your electronics specifically, and I started smelling burning plastic, and I was like, that's weird, but it was also the cafeteria at a small college, so the smell of burning plastic was probably just the food. Turns out it wasn't, though, because my backpack started smoking, and I opened up this pouch to find that the phone had completely melted through. The battery had like ruptured and had melted through the little pouch and had caught some like loose leaf paper I had in there on fire that was like smoldering, and I had to like open my backpack and like pat it out. It wasn't a big fire, it was very small.
Jesus, dude.
But yeah, and that's how I ended up getting the Note 4, which was the best phone I've ever had. I had that for like 2 years, and then I had an S7 Edge for like 4 days, and it broke on me, and there was a whole big deal where I had to send it to Samsung, and then I had to send it to AT&T, and they both refused to use it, both refused to fix it. And I ended up buying a used iPhone off my dad that I had until I bought my current phone like 3 years ago. So, my whole phone history. But regardless, the point of this episode, and my number 5 is Welcome to Night Vale, I was super in to all things Cthulhu Mythos and H.P. Lovecraft my senior year of high school. It's one of the first things I remember about my senior year of high school, because I had a brain injury earlier in my senior year of high school, so I don't remember a lot of things from that time period. One of the first things I do remember is downloading this podcast and hearing it was like H.P. Lovecraft-ish, downloading it when I got my dad's old iPhone 4, and listening to like however many episodes were out at the time in like a couple of weeks. Super good. And then I've listened to it occasionally since, and it's still going. So there's, 6 or 7 years worth of more episodes that I just haven't really listened to, because I listened up to the point that I was at then, and then I quit listening to it because I just totally forgot about it. Yeah. But it still has a very special reason, because it's the first thing that like got me into podcasts. It was also the first time I had like a real quote unquote phone that could do that kind of stuff, and really opened up a whole area of entertainment to me personally.
Yeah, I mean, between that and the internet porn, it would have been great.
Yeah, right? Amazing.
Yeah. Welcome to Night Vale also popularized the Tumblr podcast. They had like they put all their stuff on Tumblr, and that was I'm sure we'll get more into that later on your list. As another podcast relatively popular between you and I also did the Tumblr thing with their podcast as a way to like add visuals that you could look up later after listening to them.
It's weird hearing you say that, because I remember that being a big deal when I first got into it, and even being a big deal on some of the podcasts I'm currently into, and just none of that exists anymore. Like the first like 40 episodes of one podcast I'm a big fan of has art for it on Tumblr, and then they just don't do it anymore. It's all on Patreon.
Yeah.
For free. Like you can view it for free on Patreon. They just don't do Tumblr anymore. And I don't know why Tumblr fell out of.
Well, speaking of internet porn.
There we go. Yeah, I was gonna say, I know that was a big push, but I feel like these groups got off of there before that.
Yeah, well, I mean, once you had Patreon, where it was like it's just a direct revenue stream, right? Like, even if your art on there is free, I still make you go to the place that's going to ask you for money.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, I think. Now, I've never listened to Welcome to Night Vale. I'm aware of it. I'm certain I'd probably like it. The only thing I associate them with is, like, the TumblrCon that failed.
Oh, yeah?
Because they were like...
I did not know about that.
They were like you don't know about TumblrCon?
No, I had no idea.
Dude, it's like Fire Festival level bad. Like,
God, I can imagine like Reddit Con, and I assume it was vaguely the same, and that sounds terrible.
dude, it was like no, like it was a complete failure. Like whoever tried, like basically somebody tried to organize it, and they just didn't know what they were doing. And like Welcome to Night Vale was supposed to be there, and they were like honestly like the only like decent like group to show up. And as soon as they bailed, like it just domino effect, everybody was out. So like they couldn't do refunds. There was nothing to do. There was like no food. There were like no chairs. There was like a ball pit. Like somebody put like an inflatable pool full of like Chuck E. Cheese balls.
Okay.
Like in the convention center. And it's like the only thing there. Like it's just a big concrete room. Like that's like the iconic photo from this convention that like was such an epic failure, is just this like ball pit that they were like, what is happening? Like there's nothing here. Like there are no vendors, there are no like panels, there are no guests, there are no signings. There is just this fucking ball pit and nothing else. Like it was
very sad I didn't get to go to that.
It was crazy. Like it was absolutely crazy. But that's like the only thing I think of Welcome to Night Vale from. That's how I heard about Welcome to Night Vale. Actually, it was I knew they were supposed to be there, and then they like didn't go because it was a shit show.
It's worth it. If you ever, the next time you have to do a long road trip, just download the first couple of episodes. Because I remember there are some episodes that just aren't, it's like most podcasts. There's a couple episodes that don't wouldn't necessarily grab your attention if you listen to them out of the loop of the rest of the podcast. But like I've listened to the first couple of episodes a couple of times because I'll just try to like restart it, watching it from the beginning or listening to it from the beginning. And the first couple episodes are very solid.
Yeah. All right.
So.
Dope. Solid number 5.
Yeah.
Number 4. So my number 4 is so full disclosure, we are both improvisers, and I hate improv podcasts so much. They're so bad. Like some of the best improvisers in the world have improv podcasts, and I can't handle them. And these are people that I respect, people who I am entertained by, who I enjoy. But like Improv for Humans, I don't like it. Spontaneation, I can't get into it. I've tried. This is the closest thing I could find to an improv podcast that I like, that I just don't outwardly hate and can listen to. And that is Mission to Zyxx.
Yeah, I haven't listened to this one. I've heard good things.
An improvised science fiction podcast. It is fucking hilarious. I think the reason that this succeeds where so many other improv podcasts fail is, one, it's just a continuous story. And the production value is crazy. Like they pay sound people, like real actual sound people, to do their stuff, and they also are willing to like stop and go back to make sure the story is good. Like they'll redo scenes, or like if they have like a running bit, they'll be like, all right, hey, do like 4 more of those, and we'll like pick the ones that are funniest and like cut them in. Like it's not like strictly like on stage long form improv, but like it's still like largely improvised. But it's super good and it's very funny. Yeah, it's like it's like very wacky because like it's improv. It's kind of like how actually it works the same way The League works. If you've seen The League is improvised. They know going into the episode like roughly like, hey, we're starting at the bar. You have to at some point mention this thing because that's like the next part of the episode. But like the dialogue is just whatever. That's how Mission to Zyxx works. So like there's some structure that kind of know what they're doing. It's like slightly written, but like also if somebody just says something crazy, that just becomes canon forever, and then that's just like part of the show. Like Jason Mantzoukas, like when he talks about being on The League, he's like, I just say wild shit and they have to keep it in because that's how it works. Like he's just like, I just call somebody my like sister cousin or whatever. That's just what they are now. Like that is too bad, you know. Like, Mission 6 is not quite that aggressive, but there's definitely like a lot of like somebody couldn't think of a name for an alien, so they said something very dumb, and then it was just like, well, that's a main character on our show is called Beano now, so looking cool.
I've heard it's similar, that Hello from the Magic Tavern is vaguely similar or in the same kind of thing. It's improvised, but it's from like a D&D perspective. I don't know if that's worth looking into for you, but I need to listen to this. I'm going to download and listen to it this coming week.
Yeah, dude.
Because I love sci-fi. If you have listened to any of our other episodes, it's probably evident that I am obsessed with basically anything sci-fi related.
Dude, it's super good. Yeah. You should definitely do that. But yeah, that's my number 4, Mission to 6. The only decent improvised podcast I've been able to listen to.
My number 4 is Dissect, which was actually purchased by, or at least the rights to it were purchased by Spotify, I think after its first or second season. Basically, this guy, and he goes through he goes through track by track on albums. And I'm trying to think, what's the guy's name? Is not in the About section of it anymore because it's owned by Spotify, I would assume. But it started off as like it's just one guy, and he does like these really in-depth like explanations of songs on some of the like biggest albums of the last several years. I think his first one was a Kanye. No, sorry, his first album was To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar was the first one, which was fantastic because I love that album. It's probably one of the best albums ever made. I don't think there's much argument you could make against that. And he goes track by track about it, through it, and about like Kendrick's life and the real stories that fed the music in the album. And it's amazing, and it sold me on the entire podcast listening to the first 3 episodes. I'm a big fan of the album myself. And then season 2 is Kanye West, and then season 3 is all about Frank Ocean, who is another one of my favorite artists as well. And it goes all through Blonde, and I believe it actually has a primer at the beginning of it that is about his mixtapes as well. And then it has one about Flower Boy, Tyler the Creator, which is another big thing I'm a big fan of personally. As Danny is well aware of how much I love Tyler the Creator.
Yeah, no, this sounds dope. I was unaware of this podcast, but I'm like,
no,
I'm into it.
The second to most recent season, it looks like, was Childish Gambino, which sounds fantastic. I haven't listened to that. I was caught up on this one as well.
Which one?
They released Dissect.
No. Which Childish Gambino album? Because like that dude's albums can be vastly different, like depending on which one you look at.
Because the internet.
That makes sense.
I'm trying to remember. I was looking at the track names and trying to remember which one it was, because it was like it's one of the earlier 2, but I can never remember.
No, because the internet would make sense, because that was his first, like, I mean, he was already big and famous, but you could argue that kicked off his rap career in an impressive way.
Yeah. Then it goes into, let's see, the newest season is, I'm not sure because these aren't in order by season, so that's annoying. But yeah, it's a fantastic podcast. Definitely give it a listen. If you can just go through the different episodes and find an album you're a fan of and just listen to that season. The episodes are anywhere from like 30 minutes to an hour long. Really depends on how important that track is in the grand scheme of the album. I'm also personally an album guy. I like to listen to an album from front to back multiple times if I can. Like, I will take time out of my weekend or weeknight to just listen to an album back to front a couple of times, and before I move on to the next thing I'm listening to. I don't really listen to just like a single song at a time, which drives my girlfriend crazy because she's the type of person that likes just like put on a playlist or say a song and then just plays whatever random song comes after that, and I can't do that personally. It drives me up a wall. So
I can do a little bit of both. I think if
I'm at a party, yeah, but like otherwise.
It depends on the album. There are definitely certain albums that like you should just listen to front to back, and there's others that you're just kind of like, just pull off the bangers, and we can move on.
Yeah.
That sounds super interesting. I'm gonna like actually listen to this one. I love this kind of stuff. Proof of that is because my number. Oh wait, I gotta do the voice. Number 3.
There we go.
My number 3 is basically this podcast, but for movies.
Oh, cool.
It's Unspooled. Unspooled is Paul Scheer and Amy Nicholson, who is a like a movie critic who writes about movies, and Paul Scheer is obviously Paul Scheer, lover of movies, general producer, director, writer, comedy man. If you like anything on Adult Swim, this dude had something to do with it. He was either in it, wrote it, or produced it. But yeah, they take the AFI top 100 movies, and they just did 100 episodes, and they just they rolled a D100, and whatever number came up, that's the movie they would do, and they would watch it, and they would just like dissect it. And like they're just both so incredibly knowledgeable about movies, like in general, and like they do a ton of research. It's super interesting. I'm way behind on it because a lot of the movies on the AFI Top 100 are like weird and hard to find. Like some of them are like, even like you can't stream The Wizard of Oz anywhere. You know what I mean? Like
really?
You will now because MGM is owned by Amazon, so like not a big deal.
Don't even get me started on that.
Yeah, like there's just like some random movies that just like are a bitch to find. So I got behind on it, but like, God, it's super cool. And it's like an awesome, like, honestly, like if you have like a friend or significant other or somebody else who like, if you're into movies and you know somebody else is really into movies, like just listen to this together on like a weekly basis. Like watch the movie together, then listen to the podcast at work or whatever, then you can talk about it. That's what I did. I was in a relationship when I first started listening to this, and like we did that for like a long time, and it's awesome. It's super cool. I love dissecting movies. They dissect movies in a way that is like not annoying and pretentious, which you can definitely run into. I have a lot of like movie YouTube channels that I had to unsubscribe from because I just can only handle so many like, look at how cool this Russian film is. Nothing against Russian cinema, but like we get it. They do everything really slow and with rain. I get it.
That's what living in Soviet Russia feels like. Yeah. Slow and with rain.
Yeah, like slow and with rain is I assume Russia's national anthem.
Slow and with rain is the name of Putin's sex tape.
Yeah, you're slow with snow, I would assume. But like, yeah, but no, Unspooled is super good, and it's also yet another podcast that doesn't have any more episodes, which I don't think is a bad thing, because it means if you're listening to this and you want to listen to this podcast, you don't have to worry being caught up. You can just do it. You can just binge the whole thing, and you know that there's an endpoint, which I think is nice.
Well, yeah, and if they were doing the 100 movies, then after 100, you're done, right?
Yeah, they threw like some random like we're gonna talk about like blockbusters and stuff just to kind of break it up, but like largely, yeah, like gotcha. They get to the end of the AFI list and do like a couple of more, and then ultimately they're just like we did it, you know, like we got to the end.
Speaking of the purchase, the Amazon purchase, I can't wait for the next James Bond movie where the weird multi-billionaire is the good guy and James Bond is slaughtering union officials in mass for trying to take over the world, because I assume that's what's going to happen.
Daniel Craig is like, James Bond and nobody wants to work.
Yeah, Jeff Bezos is a Bond villain in like every sense of the word.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be
terrible. Like,
yeah,
it's either gonna be terrible or it's just gonna be uncomfortable because like, not that I'm not a huge Bond film guy anyway, but it's gonna be weird if he does have to fight some kind of weird billionaire, because you're gonna just be like, I just feel like I can't sit through this movie being hosted on the Weird Billionaires channel.
They're gonna go the like early mid 80s route, like Moonraker and stuff, where your Bond villains aren't gonna be like, I own the newspapers and I'm gonna start wars to make money. They're just gonna be guys that are like, I want to blow up the moon because I fucking hate the moon. Like, it's just gonna be like real cartoonish villains, because yeah, like you can't be like, because like almost every James Bond villain is just like a really rich guy who owns a bunch of companies and then uses his power to manipulate countries to do his bidding. Which is just what Jeff Bezos
just what Jeff Bezos does, yeah. Bezos.
Or honestly, Bezos, he's got the balls to be like, literally he'll star in the fucking movie as the villain. Like he'll just be like
hilarious.
He'll just be like, yeah, guess what? I own most countries.
I was the only logical choice. I don't.
He just doesn't care. He's just gonna just straight up tell people like, oh yeah, I gave like a bunch of senators $1 billion so I can do whatever the fuck I want, including make this movie. Fuck you. And then he shoots James Bond in the head. Like, he just gets to win.
Yeah, no, I feel like the end of the movie is him just walking up Tarantino style to like the camera and saying, it's a joke that you think a government worker would ever try to fight me, and then it just cuts to black, and it's like him and James like drinking martinis.
That would be truly just like James Bond goes to fight him, realizes it's Jeff Bezos, and just goes,
"My bad."
"Hello, Jeff," and like hands him a whiskey or something, and they just hang out. Oh man, Amazon sucks. We're gonna get murdered tomorrow, probably.
Probably.
That's how that goes.
They own Twitch, so.
Oh boy.
We've talked shit about. Luckily, we're not popular enough, and also like we've talked shit about Bezos a couple of times at this point, so it's fine.
Goons are on the way to our houses right now.
They know my address. They know my IP address at the very least. Oh yeah. My number 3 is lore, and this was actually the hardest one for me to pick because there was a lot of contention in my heart personally for the number 3 spot. Because I've listened to a lot of podcasts like I've never been out, and so one of my backups for this one was The Greatest Generation, which is where they go through and they watch all of the episodes of Star Trek and they talk about them, which is super fun. Even if you haven't watched Star Trek or watched the episodes they're talking about. Trying to think some other like heavy hitters for this spot, where a bunch of different role playing game podcasts, of course, as Danny mentioned, I'm super into those. But I went with lore. Lore is awesome because some of the episodes are only like 15 to 20 minutes long, which is ideal. I used to listen to it on my way home from work every day when I worked my first job post-college. And it's just stories, mostly horror-based stories from all over the world. Mostly just horror-based stories from all over the world. And the moral of the story kind of gets old towards the end because the moral of the story is always this horrible thing, this creature was actually based on just some dudes that were assholes a lot, or was based on rich people would like kidnap children sometimes for fun and stuff like that. Because mankind is always the monster is like the point of the podcast and always is. But it goes into like really in depth, like local, like hyper local, sometimes horror stories, like monster stories that, and I'm really into that kind of stuff I had never heard about. And some of it's not even necessarily like murdery bloodbath type stuff. There's one episode that like really sticks to my mind because it's about this wealthy guy who owned a bunch of property, and he was really religious, and he had like a bunch of like weird ideas about what death was. Even though he was like Presbyterian, he didn't like really. He had like a weird idea that like when you die, heaven is like on earth, and your spirit like rests here, and so he believed in ghosts and a bunch of other weird shit. But because of this, he built out of stone in the middle of the woods that he owned. I can't remember if it was just the like a living room, but it's open to like the air, and there's a table in the center of it, a stone table with a chair for himself and everybody in all of his children except for his one son, because his one son was not part of their religion. And so there's like a chair for each of them at this big stone dinner table in this weird stone like amphitheater kind of living room thing that he built before he died that has a name for everybody except for his one son that wasn't a Presbyterian or whatever. I'm sorry if you're a Presbyterian and you take this as offensive. It was some kind of type of Christianity, but he didn't actually like follow it that closely. And just like that level of like spite, and it's out in the woods somewhere. Like you can go see it if you want to. Still exists to this day. Is to me creepier than a lot of like this dude murdered a bunch of people with an axe. Because to be that into whatever your weird belief system is, that you're willing to spend lots of money to a weird icon where you think you and your family are going to sit after death in your heavenly earth body, but not have a chair for your son because he's going to be in hell, and or I think the guy believed he would still be there, but if he didn't have a chair, he couldn't like enter the area. I don't remember. It's like a really weird episode though, and it sticks with me. Like it's just one of those things I think about every once in a while. I don't know why at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it talks about, there's another episode that I really like is about like dire wolves in France. And there's like this massive wolf in France that was like eating children, and it was in a lot of stuff's like in the 1500s and 1600s, and they like finally found and like killed this wolf, and there really was just like a massive wolf that was killing and eating people. But of course the story got blown out of proportion and stuff. So it's just cool stuff like that.
I was hoping it was gonna be 2 guys in a wolf costume.
That would be even better. We can do that.
Let's run around in a wolf costume.
Kill Evil will be fine. It'll take them a couple days to find us.
Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do? Call the cops? Be like, oh yeah, no, that giant wolf is actually two guys in a wolf costume. Hey, okay, pal, this is a serious line. If you could stop leaving joke tips, that'd be great. They'd never. It's too crazy. Nobody would ever suspect it.
So let's do weird crime and dress up as animals. That sounds fun.
Oh man, let's do weird crime. Could honestly just be its own podcast.
Hell yeah. But yeah, give Lore a listen. Like I said, a lot of the episodes are like 20 minutes, and it's very fascinating stuff. So.
I at some point did listen to Lore because it's on my Spotify list of podcasts. I don't remember any of that, but I saw that you put it up, and I was very confused. I thought I had like messed up the stream. So yeah, I apparently tried to listen to it already, so maybe I will. We'll just
there you go.
It's on my very short list of podcasts on Spotify. Number 2. My number 2. You guys are going to learn pretty quickly that my podcasts revolve around like only a couple of things, and it's largely just nerdy bullshit. Because my number 2, and this is what won me first place, getting to go first in this podcast. That is Doug Loves Movies.
Okay.
You used to have to pay to listen to Doug Loves Movies. That's how old Doug Loves Movies is. You had to buy episodes. Like a caveman. I'm
not even familiar with this as an idea.
It's Doug Benson. I almost said Stanhope. It's not Doug Stanhope. It's Doug Benson. Famous for stand-up comedy exclusively about how much weed he smokes. He had a major release film called Super High Me, where he did the like McDonald's challenge just with weed. He just got like high every day for 40 days. But the thing is, I'm pretty sure he just does that anyway. Like, I don't know if it was really that big of a deal, but it's just about like smoking weed and why it's not that big of a deal. But obviously he has a bias, but he's a solid comedian. He's funny. I don't want to take anything from him. But like weed comedy is kind of his thing. But he also loves movies and like fucking loves movies, man. Like, I thought it was a bit, but like this dude knows everything about every movie ever. And he just has on like other comedy people and famous people and actors and actresses and stuff on his show. And it's like a game show almost. They like play games about movies. And like it'll be like name an actor or actress, and then we're gonna name movies that person is in until somebody can't, and then they're out, and we keep going until there's only one person left. Or they'll do like all kinds of stuff. Like they'll start reading off like actors in a movie, and you have to guess the movie, but they start at like the bottom of the IMDb page. So like they'll just start naming. They'll be like, I don't know, like Tom Hanks, and you'll be like, oh, okay, but he was like an extra in Newsies or something. You know what I mean? Like, But yeah, it's super good. It's funny. If you like movies, it's good. If you don't like movies, it's still pretty good. Most of the people on the show actually don't know that much about movies, but then they'll randomly have like movie critics on who obviously know a lot about movies, and then like it gets like really competitive.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you pay per episode, or was it like Patreon where you pay and you just get all the episodes?
I believe it was per episode. I did not listen to this podcast because you had to pay for it until it hit Spotify, and then I started listening to it.
That I don't even like, this business model is not something I was aware existed.
That's how it used to be, man. Like before Patreon was a thing, people basically had Patreon. It just wasn't its own platform. You would have like your free podcasts and your paid podcasts, and like they would be like, you know, $4.99 or whatever, or like, you know, $2.99, whatever you're gonna charge
per episode.
I mean, it's like at the time, an hour of entertainment that you could only get in this one place. Like it's just what it was. And then streaming services showed up, and people realized that like, what if you made content that was free and then made money from like other stuff? You know. And then that's just how, like, I'm sure Spotify gave Doug Benson a bunch of money to put his podcast on Spotify. But yeah, 2006 was a weird time.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. Because, like, yeah, and you and I are only separated by like 6 years, I think, in age. But I had no idea this was a thing that used to be.
Oh yeah,
which is crazy.
Oh yeah, dude. Oh yeah, definitely. Also, all of his pre-COVID, all of his shows are live, and he like tours. Like he's like come to India a couple of times, and like people like throw donuts and stuff. There's like a whole, and people like make signs. They make name tags because like the people on stage like play for somebody in the audience. And like everybody on stage like brings something for the people to win. It's always like something dumb. It's like I brought the Bible from my hotel room or like whatever.
There you go.
But people make name tags, and the name tags like are like super elaborate. Like they'll like Photoshop people's faces onto like movie posters or like bring like full ass cardboard cutouts. And every once in a while, somebody like a really shitty one just like to be funny, and like that'll be the one that gets picked. You never really get to know. It's just you're at the whim of the panel.
I'll have to check this out. No, definitely check out the first couple of episodes because this sounds very interesting to me, just like as an idea.
I would like, because you don't need to like, there's no catching up to do really, because it's basically a game show that's like just run by like a really stoned guy. Just go somewhere in like the middle so that you know all of like the growing pains of a podcast. Granted, it came out 2006, so like you probably couldn't find an episode that didn't come out more than a couple years ago. But yeah, just like pick one. They'll have the guests. Just like find somebody that you think is like good or funny, and then just listen to that one. But yeah, Doug Loves Movies. It's dope. It's been going for a long ass time.
Yeah. My number 2 is My Brother and Me, which was what I thought was the oldest podcast. No, it was the oldest podcast when it started in 2010. It's 3 brothers. I don't know that this is their most popular podcast anymore. Their most popular podcast might now be The Adventure Zone, which is actually what got me into them, because The Adventure Zone was, at least for a time, the biggest role-playing game podcast in the world. I think it has been since surpassed by a couple, and it's definitely been surpassed by...
Critical Role for sure, right?
Critical Role, thank you. That's what I was looking for, Critical Role. But Critical Role, they're not a podcast, they're a YouTube stream, so I don't know where that lines up in there.
Yeah, it says whether or not Glass Cannon wins.
Yeah, well, I guess Critical Role is a straight-up podcast now as well. But I know them from their YouTube stuff, which I've never been big into Critical Roles because their episodes are so long. It was always like hard for me to get into it. But yeah, My Brother and Me. It's 3 brothers, and they just read. They used to anyway go to Yahoo Answers, and they would just read Yahoo Answers questions and give advice based on those questions. It's very funny. Yahoo Answers is dead now, but it also used to have just like the wackiest, weirdest questions. Like when I was in high school, we would get on Yahoo Answers and like look up questions to like laugh at people for asking them and read the funny answers, because that was the thing you did in like 2009, I guess, probably 2010. And so that's how they started off, and it's just the three of them, and they goof on each other. They're very funny. They do lots of bits. It's one of my favorite podcasts of all time. I just like their humor. The Adventure Zone was... I debated putting this or The Adventure Zone on here, but I didn't want to load up too many role-playing game podcasts. And also, I really only like the first season of The Adventure Zone, which is sad, because the second season is okay. I just never connected as well to it as I did the first season. And then the third season is universally disliked for the most part, unfortunately. And then I think they're going on season 4 now. But the first season is actually a graphic novel now. The first 3 or 4 sets of it are graphic novel, and it's 5th edition D&D. The second season was Monster of the Week, which is actually a super fun game. And the setting's like really good. It was just, I just never could get into some of the episodes, unfortunately. And then the third season, they go back to D&D. And I think it's Travis takes over, and Travis is a fantastic player, but he had some growing pains as a GM. I think that kind of took away from some of the like bigger themes of the podcast in comparison to the first and second seasons, unfortunately. And I never could get into that one either. So maybe the fourth season will drag me back in. Who knows? But this is about My Brother and Me, and it's just funny. Like, just listen to it. Give it a shot. If you want my recommendation, if you want me to sell you on My Brother and Me, just Google Mabib Mabam, which is the acronym for which is MBMBAM, the Garfield question, or the Garfield monstrosity, and give that a listen. I will have Danny listen to it once we get done here, because I want to know his opinion on the question they ask, because it is one of the best things I've ever heard. It is probably my favorite moment it is 100% my favorite moment from any podcast ever. It might be my favorite moment from any media ever, because of just how bonkers and hilarious of a question it is.
Well,
and I'm not going to spoil it. So please, just, if you have to pause this and go YouTube it right now, please do.
We'll link in the description.
Yeah.
We'll make that available.
Yeah, that's my number 2.
Solid number 2.
They had a TV show.
Did they? Really?
Yeah, on CISO. Which died after like a month, and it's still available. I can't remember how you can watch it, but it's pretty good. Like, the TV show is very funny, and it's very sad that they didn't get to do more episodes of it, honestly.
Yeah. CISO had a lot of like experimental TV shows on it, and that's a great way to kill your fucking streaming service.
Yeah.
Billion-dollar properties, RIP.
Joe Bates was on CISO for like one episode, I guess, which is a guy we vaguely know that used to live here in Indianapolis.
It's that guy I saw on stage a couple of times.
Hey, I talked to him.
What was he on?
I don't know. He mentioned it a couple of times when I first started doing stand-up in Indianapolis, which was right when I think CISO like went under. It had been under for a year at that point.
Yeah, I had CISO for a couple of weeks so I could watch Harmon Quest. CISO had good TV.
It really did.
Yeah, CISO fucked up. Now it's Peacock. Nobody wants Peacock.
Yeah, that's what it's on. It's on Peacock now, which sucks.
Yeah, lame. All right, solid number 2. It's time for the juicy number 1. My number 1 is my only role-playing game podcast. It is also one of the few podcasts you can still listen to that's still going. And it's my favorite D&D podcast I've listened to ever. I'm not caught up on Glass Cannon. Maybe I turn that corner at some point, but today, now, as I record this, Dragon Friends is the greatest goddamn D&D podcast to ever be made. I love this podcast. It is, I think, 6 Australian improvisers playing D&D. Their GM knows the game tremendously well. The rest of them have no fucking idea what they're doing. It is very funny. It is done tremendously well. Something that like a lot of D&D podcasts run into is combat really like destroys your pace. And it is something that they handle tremendously well. The first season's like a little dodgy, but like there's like some like good bits. But second season forward is amazing. They are still going. It's bi-weekly, which is a bummer. You have to wait, but it is so funny. I have listening to it in the office, like while I'm working, and having to like not like laugh because you look like a crazy person with your headphones on laughing at nothing. But no, it's great. I used to have a hotkey on my keyboard that had like sound clips like from this podcast.
Nice.
It's super good. Yeah, everyone should listen to like. It's nice to have like and we see this with like Glass Cannon, like other like D&D podcasts. Like when everybody knows each other and like has known each other for like a long time, the D&D podcasts are just like much better because like you get that flow and you get that groove, and like somebody will do a bit and then everybody else will just like jump in with the bit, and it was decided like super early in the podcast. Like they were like, hey, you speak like Gnomish or whatever, and they go, oh, can I talk to him in Gnomish? And they go, yeah. And they go, what does that sound like? And they go, it's me, your cousin. And it's like shitty Italian, like, no, I think it was Southern. Like they did like an American Southern accent that was like Gnomish or Goblin. I think it was Goblin. That's just been a bit. Like anytime, like, okay, you have to like talk in like the specific languages have like shitty accents assigned to them. Like they're like, yeah, that's just what it sounds like. It sounds like bad Italian accents. And I feel like most people don't do that. Like, it would just be like a funny bit that happened once like a year ago, and they're like, no, dude, if you're gonna talk in orc, you gotta like talk like Foghorn Leghorn. But yeah, it's solid. They also have music for the entire thing done by the keyboardist from Axis of Awesome.
Oh, nice.
Who is famous for sort of, I mean, everybody knows like the 4-chord song bit, but like they did a big 4-chord song and like obviously like other like comedy songs that people like. Because yeah, it's Australia. It's just not that big of a place.
Makes sense. They're Australian. They should get King Gizzard to do something for them.
They honestly probably could. Like, I don't think it. I bet if we went to Australia and we hung out long enough, we probably meet King Gizzard and we probably like buy them a couple of beers and get them to do something silly for us. And I bet they do it.
They're on that. There's a sketch show on Netflix, the name which escapes right now, and they're on that for an episode. In one of the sketches, they just decide to have like a rummage sale, and King Gizzard comes out and like sells their merch, and they get into like a fight with them or something. It's pretty funny. It's a pretty funny bit.
I mean, yeah, I bet we could.
Yeah, my number one is Androids and Aliens, which is a Glass Cannon podcast offshoot. It was originally just the guys from the Glass Cannon podcast, plus one Eleanor De Lorenzo, who is the funniest Swedish person to ever exist. And I have...
What a weird way to categorize somebody.
It comes up a lot, and it's always hilarious because like she's a comedian and I think an actress of some sort. But I know like officially like it's comedian as like her career, and she moved to New York some amount of years ago. And when they started this podcast, it was their first offshoot from their main podcast. That was a free podcast anyway, and they play Starfinder. They added her on as like the first person to join the group as a regular player, and she is hilarious. She is just a funny person in general, and then on top of that, she's Swedish, and like she sometimes doesn't get like American phrasing is a thing that happens very often. But she's like whip smart, and so like she'll mess up a phrase, or she'll think they're saying something that's inappropriate, but it's not. It's just like it sounds inappropriate to her because she speaks English very well and has a very firm grasp of it. But like, you know, they have a lot of slang and colloquialism they use because they're from Boston and Philadelphia, so they have words that even I don't know sometimes. It's very funny. She does a lot of like bits on there. I like Androids and Aliens the best. The Glass Cannon podcast, like the original, is one of my favorites. I've been listening to it since like I've been caught up since like episode 100 or something was when I first started listening to it, and they're now at episode almost 300. So I've been listening to this for several years at this point. I like Androids and Aliens more. I love sci-fi. It is by far my favorite genre.
What is the system?
It's Starfinder.
Oh.
I thought I said that, but maybe
you might have.
My bad.
Whatever.
Starfinder is one of my favorite games of all time. It might be my favorite. There are some areas it really falls flat, which they also talk about, like Starship Combat sucks in Starfinder. I want to do a Starfinder podcast, and what I have decided to do, if I ever get the chance to do that, is we're going to do all of the roles in the battle for the Starship Combat, and then we're going to find out how it happens, and then we're just going to roleplay the entire thing, knowing in advance what happens, more like a radio play than an actual role-playing game. Because Starship Combat is not fun, really. It's fun to play if you know what you're doing, but it's like so...
It's super involved.
Yeah, it's super involved. There's not a lot of time for role play when you're playing it, and because so much of it is based on how you roll, like what you could do is based on how you roll. It's super hard to role play it because you can't really get into it because you can't, decide what actions you're going to take. Because it's not like, yeah, I run up and I run up to so and so and I swing and I get a crit and I do this and this, or it's like, oh, and I miss, but I position myself here. It's like, oh, well, I failed this roll, so I'm going to move us 4 spaces instead of 5, which means the next 3 people now have to rethink what they're doing for their turn. And there's just a lot of dead air when you're playing it, in my opinion. And it just doesn't come off it's just not fun to listen to, as one of the downsides. But they make it fun, in my opinion. But I just love sci-fi stuff, and so like a sci-fi role-playing game that is built off of Pathfinder, which is one of my favorite role-playing games of all time, is just right up my alley. And I love the cast. They recently, well, I say recently, they added Sydney Emmanuel as a sixth person, which I was actually worried about when they first did, because I feel personally like 6 people is too many.
That's a lot of people
for a role-playing game for a role-playing game just in general. Whether you're podcasting it or not, but she also crushes it. She's become quickly one of like my favorite media people, I guess. She's also very funny. And I hope they bring both of them back. They actually, unfortunately, and this is good news if you're like Danny, they are canceling Androids and Aliens, or at least putting it on indefinite hiatus after they finish the current AP they're on, which is Dead Sons, which sucks because I love the cast. I love Starfinder, but it just doesn't bring in as many views as they had hoped it would in comparison to some of the other stuff they do, which like I understand. Starfinder is also not the best game. I think it's an amazing game. I think the world is awesome. I think some of the campaigns are amazing. And I think the homebrew you can do it is better than any role-playing game I've ever played. But the APs can be kind of weak. That's not like most of the APs aren't very good in my opinion. Dead Sons is very bad. It was written before Starfinder was finalized, so there's a lot of stuff that just does not make sense in the rules, or like in universe at all. It's more like I don't know. I'm not going to get super into it, but it's this is the podcast that has probably had me laughing out loud to the point that I had to pause it because I was listening like while doing something else at work, where I was like doing chores around the house. Because of just there's probably a moment every episode that is so funny I have to stop what I'm doing and re-listen to it a couple of times. I could go on and on and on about the Glass Cannon stuff. I'm not going to.
That's it's a solid number one. I think it's great that comedians have just taken over. Like they really cornered the market on the role-playing game podcast thing.
Yeah.
Like I feel like we started out with there's a million role-playing game podcasts out there. We have one. But like, yeah, it feels like stand-up comedians and playwrights have really figured it out. That's who
is Glass Cannon. It's 2 stand-up comedians. Oh, it's a stand-up comedian, a talent agent, a playwright, a Juilliard educated playwright who's now a professor of playwriting at a different New York college, if I recall correctly, and an actor. Were the original people who started it. And now it's them and then another comedian and a different actor, and then people from within the role-playing game community also join. Eric Mona is in a lot of their offshoot stuff they do, and he's the guy who wrote Pathfinder, or at least wrote a lot of parts of it, which is amazing. He's also hilarious.
You would not expect.
Yeah, no, you'd think... agreed. I mean, just based on the type of people that you would think would write role-playing games, maybe. I don't know. I feel like I actually know quite a few people that write role-playing games, and they're always hilarious. So
I just feel like a guy who looks at people fighting and goes like, yeah, that's a 6. That's 6 points of damage right there. Like, if you can break down like human interaction into like literal numbers, I just assume maybe you're not great at it.
No, he's Eric Mona's hilarious. So,
well, solid number one. We ended on ultimately 2 sides of the same coin, as is tradition, I suppose. But yeah, this has been our top 5 podcasts. Thanks for listening. If you dig it, give us a follow or a like or a subscribe or whatever you enjoy our content button is, depending on your platform. And yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah. Music's already playing super loud right now. You can't hear it live, but you'll hear it later on YouTube. Speaking of which, I need to hit up I need to hit that guy up and get more music from him soon.
Hey, TFA!
Yeah, TFA's been hanging out. I didn't want to cut you off, but yeah. Pathfinder is very good. I have not played 2.0 yet.
You're going to have the opportunity to. I don't know. How that's going to work, given your schedule upcoming.
I have no idea. I don't even know what that schedule's going to be. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll figure it out. It'll be fine. Mega work.
Yeah. So this is a separate. So first off, we had talked about changing our podcast name, which we should figure out.
Yes.
But I was also thinking we had talked about at one point doing a podcast where we just did a different podcast idea until we got bored of it, and then we did another one, and then so on and so forth. Do we want to do that with this one, or do we want that to be a separate entity?
I think we should have a bunch of podcast ideas first before we do that. I like this. I agree. I mean, I shouldn't say I agree. I had brought it up, but I'm sure we both thought it. But yeah, we need to change the name of the podcast.
Yeah.
Or take the word podcast out of it.
5 things.
Well, not call it the 5 things because that's weird too. But like, I guess it depends if we want to put it on Spotify still.
I assume we do. I mean, might as well, right?
Yeah. I just have to rework all the sound. I don't know why, but the video editing stuff, when it exports only sound, it sounds like garbage, and I didn't take the time to listen to it. But if you listen to it on Spotify, it's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah, the name is The 5 Things Podcast with a number 5.
Yeah. So yeah, clever name for that at some point soon, but otherwise, yeah we just roll with it. But yeah.
Yeah, and then on the other thing I was saying, I'm going to run the Pathfinder AP Strength of Thousands, I think.
Oh, right,
and, yeah. It comes out, I want to say next month, beginning of next month, and it'll release monthly per book, 6 books. There is, however, there is an AP currently out that goes from levels 1 to 11.
Stop recording.
And it's a mega dungeon. And then they recently released another AP that goes from like level 11 to 16 maybe. That looks super fun. It's called like the Tournament of the Ruby Lotus or something, and it's just Yu Yu Hakusho's tournament arc with Mortal Kombat.
Like, shit.
Yeah, it looks super cool. It is probably the thing I'm second most excited about. I don't know, it's a toss-up. Because you have to be level 11 to do it, which means you have to like dedicate, going through levels 1 through 11.
That's 33 things that you have to do?
Yeah, give or take.
Yeah, because it's 1 per 3 levels, right?
Oh, it's not a Pathfinder Society thing. It's an AP. Pathfinder Society, is a different thing. Pathfinder Society, what is cool about that, and I was telling you, is that you can do some of the APs now, and so long as your DM is somebody who's registered through Pathfinder Society, you can just roll your experience from those APs into Pathfinder Society through a new character, which is sweet. But this is an actual AP, which is like the books that release, not Pathfinder. Pathfinder Society is all one-shots that take like anywhere from 3 to 6 hours to play.
I'm down. Do we want to report it?
We can. I hadn't decided yet. I had initially planned. I don't know. That's actually something I've been arguing with myself about. Because on the one hand, I want to do it with people. It's something I want to do with people that I know.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to do it in person if we can, or for at least as long as we can. And if you're going to play in it, obviously it'll go online in July/August. I guess. I don't know. I guess that's really up to you. I don't have to make that decision.
Oh,
but I assumed.
Yeah, well,
and so if we want to record it, we can, because we might as well if we're gonna record it. Well,
if we're gonna help. If we're gonna do it live, then we have to figure out how to record it.
Yeah, I know. That was the thing I was thinking. I thought it would be fun to like do live. We don't have to if we want to record it. It was something I've been actually bouncing around. I might as well talk to you about it now. I thought it would be fun to do something live and play together. I
agree. It's just there's technical
and just to play, like just for the fun of playing it would be nice versus recording it, because I had honestly thought that we were going to start recording and trying to get more adept
right
people, because as much as I love my friends, and if you guys are watching this, it's, thanks for joining, and you're welcome to play. And still,
it's gonna ask if we were still recording or still streaming. We are still streaming.
Yeah. Not the same thing. It's just, I feel like sometimes they struggled with the fact that we are playing a game to entertain people, not necessarily to like play the game 100% of the time. And also just schedule wise, versus I feel like it's easier to get people that are entertainers to do that kind of stuff if we want to like set a schedule and record and all that.
Yeah.
So for the main podcast.
All right. Fuck, it's almost 11 o'clock. I'm gonna kill the stream really quick. Thank you, TFA, for hanging out, and thank you anybody who isn't TFA for hanging out who didn't say anything. It's okay. You don't have to talk to us. You can just hang